Larry, let me start with one of the, tragic things that have happened since the war started between the United States and Iran, which was the bombing of the school, primary school in Iran, which was, the outcome was 168 schoolgirls being killed in that attack. Donald Trump said that it wasn't the United States first. He was asking, and we had Pete Hegseth saying that we are just evaluating, we are assessing what was that. Then it came out that the evidence came out showing that it was a Tomahawk missile hitting the building, not just once, various times. And then Donald Trump said it could be a Tomahawk, but there were plenty of Tomahawk missiles out there. Iranians may use one of them to attack. How this guy, you have to be I don't know how to describe it, a pathological liar to go that far. Because you have to understand what is the responsibility. You cannot lie and, get away with that. What is your understanding of what has happened and the way that Donald Trump is trying to just lie about it?
Actually, Nima, I think the world is looking at, increasingly becoming aware, at least inchoately, that they're looking at two of the most accomplished, in the very general sense of that word, accomplished liars on the face of the earth, Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Netanyahu is a sophisticated liar. He's a liar who usually has enough material in his lie to make it sound convincing and even to give some people research difficulties in checking up on him. But he is nonetheless a prevaricator, a deceit, and a liar. Donald Trump is none of those things. He's just a liar. He doesn't have any mellifluous voice. He doesn't have any synergy to his lies. He doesn't have any connection to his lies in many cases. He pulls them from whole cloth. In a good GI term, he pulls them out of his ass. That's where Donald Trump gets his words, from moment to moment, from event to event. So he's not a polished liar like Netanyahu is. But together they make, I think it's fair to say, the two greatest lying leaders on the face of the earth. And this is only one example. There are just thousands of them lying out there. And one of the things that I fault our mainstream media for, though they do point out the lies periodically, they even assemble them sometimes in forward sections of their newspapers or their video casts. And they emphasize that he's lying, and they detail the lies, and Saturday Night Live and a number of other comedy shows make fun of them. Jon Stewart makes fun of them, but nobody does anything about them. No one in that somnolent body of the people's representatives known as the United States Congress has got the courage, other than a few individuals, and they know as individuals they have no power, to do anything about it. And yet, the greatest power, as Trump is wont to say, on the face of the earth, is constantly lying to his own people and the rest of the world. So don't ask me to explain it.
Yeah. Larry, before, I talked today with Professor Ted Postel. He was mentioning the capabilities on both sides, the air defense system, missiles. And he said we somehow underestimated the Iranian missile system and the precision they have with their missiles. And on the other hand, it's something that the Trump administration somehow exaggerated or overestimated the capabilities to go against the missiles coming to Israel. And he said, so far from what we've learned from open source, media, and we've learned that most of these radars have been destroyed, and that's why Israel, the early warning system, is not working anymore. And missiles are getting and hitting the targets without suffering from any, difficulties. In what is your understanding when you see Pete Hegseth today came out saying, we are winning, we are on the verge of your victory, and everything is happening? What is happening? Because you have to, what is in their mind by, totally distorting the reality?
Well, Pete Hegseth, I don't know this is for a fact that this is valid or true, has joined the ranks of Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump. But in his case, I don't know if it's because he's being mis or malinformed by ranks below him. He's being persuaded to the lies he's telling, if he knows they're lies, by the president himself or some of his lackeys. I just don't know what Pete Hegseth's motivation is. I can give you some facts that I've heard that I trust are probably at least halfway valid, coming from people who will still talk to me in the Pentagon. Hegseth has a problem with alcohol, so he resorts into that problem, if you will, from time to time. And like Lindsey Graham, whom I think increasingly resorts to it all the time. I've not seen Lindsey lately, and I try to watch him. Not only is he with a despite that's unbelievable, and so I want to watch this guy who is probably the greatest spokesperson for the Trump administration and its nastier instincts. And Lindsey increasingly is, I would say, inebriated to drunk when he's giving his great disquisitions on everything from the war in Iran to the treatment of immigrants in America or whatever. So this is a lying administration, a dissembling administration. Are they ever going to be caught out? That's my question. Are they ever going to be caught out? And as to Postol's pronouncements on the missiles and such, I have no doubt that they're probably reasonably accurate. But I'm seeing video. I'm having videos sent to me from above Tel Aviv and from on the street in Tel Aviv and from on the street in Haifa now, at the port in Haifa. I see things burning from ground to 200-300 feet up in the air. I see firemen and police and security personnel and civilians running around trying to fix things, trying to put things back in order. I see civilians lying in the street, wounded or dead. I can't tell from the videos. So I know that Haifa and Tel Aviv are being ripped apart by these missiles. And I see videos of the sky. And the sky shows me very little going up and a whole lot coming down. Whereas previous videos that I was getting from this same source showed me almost all the time missiles coming down and missiles going up, with the missiles going up 2 to 3 times as many as those coming down. I'm not seeing that hardly at all anymore. So that tells me that what you're saying and what Postol has said is true from my own eyes seeing it. These missiles that Iran is shooting now, with great circumspection, really, when you talk about how many they're sending in, to what targets they're sending them, and the frequency with which they're sending them, which tells me they know what they're doing in terms of limiting their strikes to only those targets that will be meaningful, and in husbanding their missiles because they know, as Donald Trump seems not to know, this is going to be an extremely long war. And it's causing enormous destruction wherever they go. And what I'm really seeing mostly is Israel, because I don't have visibility over other places. Like I've heard disaster stories about Bahrain, for example. We had one of the most expensive radars we own and in the region, completely demolished by a missile coming in from Iran. We were blinded by that. We couldn't see. These radars are hooked up, what many people don't realize, and I'm not sure I understand it completely because it's fairly complicated, but these missiles and radars and F-35s and other aircraft too, but the F-35s in particular are all coordinated. The F-35 has the capacity from its cockpit to coordinate a multitude of weapon systems and happenings on the battlefield. and to provide real-time and almost real-time intelligence for targeting and so forth. This missile in Bahrain, this radar in Bahrain was central to that, was key to that. It was also key to the Persian Gulf and protecting the Strait of Hormuz. It was destroyed. It was destroyed. And we're blind there now. I'm sure we'll rush something in or some things in because it's going to be hard to replace it. But that shows you how clever the Iranians are with regard to their targeting and how they don't essentially waste missiles. They're hitting things that are very important to us and very important to the conduct of this war from our side. While at the same time, we're committing war crime after war crime. Nima, dropping bombs on civilians to drop bombs on civilians is a war crime. Dropping bomb on an oil facility near Tehran that then spreads poison oiled air, if you will, all over Tehran is a war crime. Bombing a school was a war crime. Bombing the hospital was a war crime. War crimes par excellence. Now, someone said to me this morning, well, who's going to hold them accountable? Apparently no one. But we are putting negating everything that we've done in the previous 50 years with regard to international law and what constitutes a war crime. We will regret that. We will regret that. I'll make that statement right here and hold myself to it till I die. We will regret it. We're doing something that no one in the world probably ever thought a nation in our proximity of power and our situation would do, especially since we crafted it all. We built it all. We made sure that the pieces we were putting together from Geneva all the way up to roughly the end of H.W. Bush's administration was conducive to our own interests, sure, but it was conducive to a lot of global interests, particularly the international law part and the part that went along with freedom of the seas and that sort of thing. Gone. It's gone. Color it gone. It's in the past. I'm not sure we can regain it. What that means is, as I've said many times before, a Hobbesian world par excellence. It means that we no longer are there to attenuate that Hobbesianism somewhat. Sometimes we deepened it and made it more profound, but most of the time we were a force, as we used to say, a force for good in the world. We are no longer a force for good. We're not even neutral. We're a force for evil. Donald Trump has brought evil to the White House of the United States. Not to say that George W. Bush didn't bring it too with his torture program, but Donald Trump has amplified it majorly. We are now an evil state in the world in 60% of the world's eyes. That's a tremendous transformation in my lifetime and really in the last 20 years of my lifetime. And we're perfecting it right now in this war. I just watched a webinar with the Climate Security Working Group put on to discuss essentially three things: water, food, and energy, and how this conflict in the Levant, in Iran in particular, but other countries too, is impacting that. The impacts are just incredible. The impacts on everything from, think of this, for example, Ukraine was a tremendous impact when it got started, when the special military operation kicked off, because Ukraine and Russia are producers of a lot of the world's food, especially food that was going to Africa. So it was the producers getting hurt, and the follow-on effect for Africa, for example, was way higher prices for food, and in some cases they couldn't even get it. Now what we're looking at is a portion of the world that is a fundamental consumer, not a producer. And it's being disturbed, and we're taking out things like agriculture in terms of fertilizer, petroleum-based products that are necessary to farming and so forth. We're taking out all these things, or at least we look like we're going to take them all out and prohibit them from getting out the way they should. And I suspect that's a good look. And so now we're going to have an entire swath of the world that is not only the most impacted at the moment by climate change, and having drought and having water problems and heat problems and so forth, with an El Nino coming up in June or July, which will amplify these problems. I understand Tehran alone had some temperatures that were just unbearable. They're going to have double that this time around. And all of this is happening because of Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. And the disaster that they were describing in these three areas, water, food, and energy, is going to impact not just the Levant, not just Saudi Arabia, not just the drier areas in that region, but also the world because of the spinoff effects of all of this. So all of this because of Donald Trump's ignorance, outright ignorance, and lying about what he's starting. He has no idea what he started. I wish he'd watched this webinar. He has no idea what he started, and he isn't going to end it anytime soon. Many people are going to die, including Americans. The casualty count's going to go up, and many people in the region are going to die. And Marco Rubio, being totally negligent in getting Americans out of the region like he should have, because he didn't want to warn Iran in the middle of diplomacy that we were going to attack them. That would have been a sure warning. They're trapped. They can't get out. And now we're trying to rustle up airplanes and airlines that will fly in and get them out and everything. And we're finding that most of them don't want to do it. So this is a tragedy, a true tragedy that Donald Trump is almost single-handedly, along with Bibi Netanyahu, responsible for. The president of the United States is responsible for this. War crimes galore, bombs that are doing nothing but killing civilians. I think Ted and others have been right about that too. This is incredible what the Iranians have done. Most of these missiles are so far underground and so well hidden and only have to expose themselves momentarily to be fired, and then it closes up again, that you're not going to get them. And we are not getting them. They're going to continue to come out. They're going to continue to punish the people that they land upon, most dramatically Israel.
Larry, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Lindsey Graham had an interview on Fox News recently, just yesterday.
He was drunk.
He's begging, he's somehow threatening, not begging, threatening Saudi Arabia with consequences if the country doesn't join the fight against Iran.
Yeah, I want to know what brand of liquor he's drinking now because it's deteriorated markedly.
Yeah. And does he have any sort of point militarily, Saudi Arabia? What are the capabilities, and how is that possible for the United States to open up Saudi Arabia, come into that sort of, front? And because they have to coordinate, it's some sort of coordination between those people who are attacking those. It's going to be so difficult to let Saudi Arabia get in.
Well, Saudi Arabia just doesn't have the wherewithal and the capacity to do anything but get their pilots shot down and killed. For example, we saw the Saudi capabilities versus Al Ansar, the Houthis. We saw Saudi capability for years, and those Saudi capabilities were majorly augmented. The only thing we didn't do, and I'm not sure about this, Nima, don't think we did, was put pilots in their F-15s. Either the standard ones or the extended range ones we gave them. We gave them everything else. We gave them precision-guided munitions in the form of JDAMs. Their iron bombs could be saddled with precision-guided capability. We gave them the fuel. We gave them the intelligence on where the Houthis were and when. We allowed them to strike the port, the cranes in the port that disable the Yemeni from bringing any foodstuffs in. Had to put a naval blockade out there to keep them from doing that again. So we did one or two positive things, but basically we were a partner in that war, and they lost. The UAE let little Sparta, they left because they knew they were losing. So they left, probably the only real soldiers, if you will, in the coalition. They left. So what is that going to add? What is any Gulf state? What Lindsey's looking for is just the imprimatur of the people we've been giving weapons to for years for billions and billions of dollars. He's just looking for their imprimatur in this war, and they're not giving it to him. And I don't blame him a bit. What I'd be doing if I were the Saudi royal family, if I were the Qataris, if I were the Bahrainis or anyone else, and I don't support these people at all. If they fell tomorrow morning, I'd be happy, I'd clap. But what I'd be doing if I were they is I would be looking for a new big daddy. I wouldn't be kowtowing to the United States of America at all anymore. Because Nima, this is a reality. We will leave the Middle East when this concludes or before. We are going to be driven out of the Middle East by those people whom we said couldn't touch us with a farthing. Essentially the Iranians. We're going to be driven out. But it's going to be a combination of everyone there determining that we're not dependable, we're deceitful, we're more harm than we are help, and going elsewhere. Now, I wish in that process, I dearly wish in that process that the people of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and elsewhere would overthrow their rulers and establish some sort of democracy. I don't care what it looks like even. I don't care if it looks like Iranian democracy, because Iranian democracy is more democracy than exists in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. Frankly, it is. We won't admit that, but I will. So if they had some sort of government like that, that would be fine with me. I don't care if there are religious aspects to it. We're a damn theocracy now with Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. So what's wrong with theocracy? Donald Trump's a theocrat of his own making. This is really game-changing, what we're doing right now. It is game-changing. Certainly in the Levant, in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East in general, probably in North Africa. It's game-changing for us. We are going to be compelled, essentially, to follow at least the prima facie evidence in our national security strategy and retrench and come home in many respects. And I suspect Ukraine is going to help us do the same thing with regard to Europe. So you're looking at, if I'm still alive in 5 years, check with me. I probably won't be, but check with me. We'll probably be home. En masse, we'll be home.
Larry, today I thought
Mark Carney's got to worry about that, because then we got enough forces to take Canada.
Yeah.
We'll march on Canada. That'll be our next exploit. You think I'm jesting about that? When you see the results, you will see it probably. When you see the results around 2060 of the climate crisis and what it does to immigration in the world and what it does to peer powers along the northern tier, where it's going to be last in its damning effects, you won't laugh at that, because we'll be moving to Canada in order to survive.
Larry, I think right now one of the questions in the mind of these countries, Saudi Arabia and those Persian Gulf Arab states, is that so it's not just about oil, because when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, it's about everything for them.
Yep.
And
that the impact on this webinar.
And why, I think the question in their mind is, why do they need to sacrifice that much of having American bases in their countries? Because if there were no American base in those countries,
they would not be being hit.
Exactly.
That's not too hard to figure out, and I think they're probably thinking that way. The question is, how many of them and their sovereign wealth funds and other instruments of financial success, how many of those things are so incontrovertibly, irredeemably connected with the U.S. system? And how fast can they extricate themselves from that system and either be neutral for a while, independence for a while, which I think is what Erdogan is toying with in Turkey, or saddle up with a new system. Now, the new system is being crafted even as I speak. And here I mean financial system. The economics are already there. The technology is already there. The industry is already there. China, But the financial system's not there yet. That's the reason Xi Jinping put out what he put out a few weeks ago. He is now going to work on being a financial system as well as all the other things he is, or China is. When that happens, and it will probably take a few years to be completely transitioned, then we'll be on the outside unless we change our modus vivendi or modus operandi, and we decide to what we should have done back at the end of the Bush administration, H.W. Bush administration in 1993, and that is become a peer power that cooperates with the rest of the world. We don't have to be first. We can be, the old Latin expression, we can be equals amongst equals. We don't have to be first amongst equals, primus inter pares. But we chose not to do that. We chose to become the number one power in the world in every dimension of that power. And we chose to punish the rest of the world if they didn't acknowledge that and bow down to us. And we found out the rest of the world wasn't having any of that. And the special military operation in Ukraine is an example of that. This disgusting war in the Middle East is an example of that. And frankly, Bibi Netanyahu and Israel are examples of that. Vestiges from 1948 and the perfidy and deceitfulness of the British and the Americans in perpetrating colonialism in the form of a statelet in Palestine. It's all coming due. The bill is all coming due, and it's going to cost a lot of lives and a lot of blood and a lot of treasure. But the victor at the end of the day is not going to be America.
Yeah. Larry, here is what Pete Hegseth said moments ago.
Very strong place, giving the President of the United States maximum options. And from the beginning, from this podium, we haven't stated how long it will take. Our will is endless. Ultimately, the President gets to determine the end state of those objectives, right? But what he's said continually, and I want the American people to understand, is this is not endless. It's not protracted. We're not allowing mission creep. The President has set a very specific mission to accomplish, and our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. He's the one deciding, he's the one elected on behalf of the American people when we're achieving those particular objectives. And so it's not for me to posit whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end. That's his, and he'll continue to communicate that. What we serve him as is we give him updates on a daily basis of exactly where we are so he can make that determination on the throttle.
Larry, he said our will is endless. I don't know if the logistics are endless. And the other question would be, that specific goal or objective, what is that?
That's a good question. That's what I was going to point out right away. What is Donald Trump's strategic objective, Petey boy, and therefore yours? Because you did not mention it, nor have you mentioned it in the discourse you put forward thus far, nor has the president. In fact, the president has been utterly discombobulated and confusing as to what our objective is, and the timeline that he forecasts for meeting that objective. So, Petey, tell me, Petey, how are you going to get definitive guidance for a man who goes before the American people who put him in office, sad to say, and can't tell them any answers to the questions you just posed? Not a single one has Donald Trump answered. So how are you going to get your instructions again, Petey? Tell me. Are you going to call him on the telephone? Are you going to go over in a meeting of the National Security Council, meetings which he never has? Are you going to go over there? Are you going to talk to the president and you're going to get his word? Does he speak to you differently than he does to the American people? Because to the American people, all he does is equivocate, lie, dissemble, and act like he's an idiot. So does he do that with you, Petey? Let me in on your meeting, Petey. I want to know why you're saying what you're saying, because I don't understand what you're saying. This war could go on for years. This war could go on for days. It could go on for months. Which is it, Petey? What is your plan? How are you executing it? And where are you on your objectives in that plan, if you have any? That school didn't get you down the road any distance. The bombing of the oil facilities didn't get you down the road. In fact, it made the situation in the Gulf even worse. None of the things you are doing right now with your infinite inventory, which isn't infinite, of weaponry, is getting you any closer to a goal that isn't even articulated. How can you stand there as the Secretary of War, Defense? How can you stand there and tell those lies to the American people? What you really should be saying is, I don't understand my boss and I don't know where we're going, but I hope we've got the wherewithal to get there, and I hope we don't run out of it before we get there. Because that's the truth. That's the truth. Donald Trump has no idea where he's going. He is following in the wake of Bibi Netanyahu. And Bibi increasingly has difficulty figuring out where he's going. The one aspect of Bibi that still troubles me, I think he may be going towards the use of a nuclear weapon, because he's going to be in really dire straits within probably 10 to 20 days. And then you've got to ask yourself other questions too. The other questions are very relevant. And obviously, Hegseth didn't even talk about him. He didn't even mention him. There's no one else in the world, ally, enemy, or neutral, in Pete Hegseth's discourse. There are no other people in the world in his discourse. What about other people? What about Europe? In this webinar I was attending this morning, do you know how badly off Europe is with regard to its stocks of liquid, whatever, LNG, oil stocks, whatever? It's 60% of what it was last year. That's disaster. That's disaster for Europe. What does Europe do? Does Europe enter this conflict as NATO? There are rumblings about certain leaders who want to, attack on one and attack on all. Well, when were you attacked? Oh, we were attacked in Cyprus or southern Greece or wherever. Do you know that for sure? Because Netanyahu is conducting false flags attacks in Turkey and in the northern rim of the Mediterranean and probably elsewhere. He's doing those things. When it's just a lone drone or a couple of drones or whatever, or a missile coming down, that's Israel. That's not Iran. If Iran does it, buddy, you'll know it. You will have significant impact on the ground if Iran does it. Go ask Bahrain. So all of this is confusing, but Petey doesn't even recognize these people. He didn't even mention Israel. He did not mention the status, the progress or lack of progress of Israel. And he didn't mention the beating Israel is taking. Nima, I don't even know if Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth know what I know from the videos that have been shared with me about what's happening to Israel. From the press, our press and their press, of course, which are under incredible censorship. Both our press now in Israel and Israel's press under incredible censorship are telling the American people nothing. I dare say no one out in the hinterland in America knows that Israel is taking a pounding. They're being literally destroyed. And it isn't going to get any better because there isn't anything going up. And there's a whole lot coming down. How do you make decisions in an environment where untruths are all you have for intelligence? Lies and obfuscations and propaganda are all you have for intelligence. And yet Petey's standing up there saying he's going to make his decisions based on the biggest liar of them all in the White House. I'm scared. I'm frightened for my country.
I think, Larry, with the outcome, what has happened so far, not only in the Arab states, but also with the case of Japan and South Korea, today we've learned, we've seen in the Korean media, South Korean media, they're showing that they're dismantling Patriot systems, THAAD systems to move
Ship
them to
out.
Israel.
Yeah.
How is that gonna, they're under tremendous pressure economically, and right now militarily they're naked. And
if I were Korea, as I've said before on other podcasts, I don't know if I said it on yours or not, but as I've said before, if I were Korea, I would be thinking seriously about ending the security relationship with the United States, because it's clear that we don't care about defending South Korea against North Korea, which is the primary reason. It hasn't been the reason for a long time, and the Koreans are suspicious of this, for our being on the peninsula in the first place. They know increasingly in Korea, especially the nomenclatura, the aristocrats of South Korea, especially the Conservative Party, they know and are fearful of the fact that we want to fight China from Korea, and that's why we're there. And they don't want to fight China, and they don't want people who want to fight China on their peninsula. and so, we're just adding fuel to the fire to the Koreans telling us, go home, get out of here, leave us. We don't need you anymore. Thank you very much. Japanese are another matter altogether. The Japanese are just as want under this new leader, and I don't know her that well, but I've listened to her a couple of times. They're just as well to come join the fight in the Gulf, because their fuel is going to be threatened majorly. I don't know which side they joined the fight on, though, really. I suspect they would do it on our side, but I don't know that for sure. And what would they be offering to the fight, really? Because the kind of weaponry Nima, here's the dilemma that Hegseth has. It isn't the extinguishing of munitions, though that proceeds apace in some very critical categories like THAAD and Patriot. It isn't the fact that we don't have enough force. Ultimately, it will be the fact, if we decide on ground troops, that we don't have enough force, that's for sure. But it's that we're fighting a different war. You've heard the term asymmetric warfare. We're fighting with what we have, which is all we have. And the Iranians are fighting with what we never suspected they had in the quantity and accuracy that they have, and in the ability to fire even under fire that they have. So it's a totally asymmetric conflict. They're fighting a war where they're being killed, no question. Things are being destroyed above the ground, and they've got 93 million more people to go. And they are firing back with lethal accuracy and deadliness. And they're hitting both of their principal enemies, Israel and the United States in the region, and they're having to take out a few of their comrades in the regions, their fellow states in the regions, because they are adjacent to or contributory to U.S. capability to fight them from there. So it's not quite that clean cut, but that's basically the way it goes down. It's extremely asymmetric. Iran doing one thing, the United States doing the other. The United States doing something that isn't really impacting a situation of victory, if you will. I don't think there's any victory in this, but let's say that for a moment. And Iran doing something that means your attempts at whatever you want to achieve are going to fail. And we're going to be here. At the end of the day, we're going to be here, and we're going to have a few missiles left, and we're still going to be shooting them. This is not a conflict that does anything but ruin both sides, and particularly the big guy who has a lot to ruin.
No. Here it seems that Macron has some sort of solution for the Strait of Hormuz. Here is what he said, Larry.
We're also setting up, as we speak, a purely defensive mission. This is a support mission, the purpose of which is to work with other European and indeed non-European states. The purpose, again, as soon as possible, when we pull out of the more intensive part of the conflict, to provide escorts, container ships to gradually reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, a passage for international trade, but also a passage for oil and gas, which should be able to come out of the region. So we are working on this mission. We're preparing it with our partners. This will take place in good order, and we've started discussing this. This is a peaceful defensive mission, it's a support mission, but indeed it is essential for our economies and indeed for the global economy at large. And also,
that depends, having been there and planned for a similar mission in Ernest Will, Praying Mantis, and a series of other missions where we essentially escorted Kuwaiti tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, 1988, 89, somewhere around that time frame. Having been there and planned that, I'll tell you there are diametrically opposed conditions today. Now, if the Europeans wanted to strike a deal with Tehran, in order to escort ships through the strait that are essential to their arrival, whether it be for gas products. That'd be a different matter. And if the Europeans sent ships to do that, as we did in Ernest Will, and they did it in good faith, I think maybe the Iranians might go along with it. The same with the Japanese and others that might need that. If they want to join the United States in bringing fire on Iran with their warships or whatever, airplanes off of them, they don't have enough to really influence the battle any further than it already goes. The air's full of airplanes already. That's a different matter altogether, and I would wish them well, but they won't achieve anything much. Let's look at the strait for a moment. The strait is roughly 17 miles, I think, across, nautical miles, 30 kilometers, 33 kilometers, something like that. But the passageway for the ships, especially the bigger ones, is very narrow, and where the depth is sufficient for a big tanker to go through and so forth. So in the time that we were doing Ernest Will, there was no capacity. There was some capacity, but it was very slim, and we destroyed it pretty quickly, especially in Praying Mantis. For the Iranians to impact anything, doing anything in the strait, other than throw a mine out and hope Bridgerton, for example, hit a mine. Maybe one of our combatants hit a mine, as I recall, too. But now they have the capacity from well inland, or they also have the capacity close to the shore to interdict that strait and to damage ships. You sink one ship in that strait, and you probably have closed that strait until you can get in there and drag that ship out. Maybe you sink 2 or 3 in there, and you definitely have closed it. And let's just look at the other example. I'm not saying they will do that. I'm just saying they have the capacity to do that. So people need to start thinking about what they're going into before they go into it. And talking to Tehran ahead of time and getting a deal worked out would be one thing. But just going in there as a U.S. ally, as it were, especially under the NATO treaty, and doing something with guns blazing is another thing altogether. And let's look at the other end of the spectrum, if you will. What did the Houthis do in the Red Sea? They simply threatened shipping. That drove insurance prices up. That drove the shippers away. And so eventually, even with all this U.S. power displayed in the Red Sea, to some chagrin because we lost billions of dollars worth of equipment, we didn't stop them. What resulted was people who weren't supporting Israel in their brutal war in Gaza and elsewhere, now Lebanon too, didn't get through. And people who, or did get through, and people who were supporting Israel didn't get through, to the tune of the port of Eilat at the end of the sea, up there in that little arm that sticks off the Gulf of Aqaba or something like that, is moribund now. It's not even a port anymore, except in name only. It doesn't do any commerce. What's to stop the same thing from happening from a far more lethal point of view with Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, if we really want to get down to brass tacks? Now, if they can work out some kind of deal where they are non-hostile with regard to Iran and non-complementary with American forces in terms of bringing P on Iran, then maybe they'll agree to let them escort certain tankers through. I don't know. It'd be a very complicated thing. We did some of this in that 2009 petroleum exercise I told you about in Beijing, but we soon found it was rather too complicated. And what we did was seal off the areas and everything with American military force with the blessing of the Chinese and the blessing of the rest of the world. That's not the situation here. You have a belligerent and a belligerent. And so it's going to be very difficult to arrange something whereby tankers could get through for certain purposes and not for others. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be difficult to do. And Iran would be the arbiter of that, ultimately, not the United States. Trump will say he's the arbiter. Macron may say he's the arbiter, but they aren't. Iran will be the person, the state entity, that says who crosses through the Strait of Hormuz and who doesn't. We need to confront that and face that and understand the damage we're doing as we continue this war on the global economy. I'm not even sure that Trump cares. His bud in Moscow, Putin, doesn't care. He's going to make a windfall off of this. I'm not sure Trump cares either, because he's making a windfall off the defense industry, and he's ultimately going to make a windfall off the fossil fuel industry because the price is going to go up so far. And we haven't seen the volatility that I saw in 2009 yet. We just haven't. We got prices up to $200 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude. That is globally destabilizing in so many respects. And it could get there. It could get there. This brief surcease that we've had, where the prices sort of stabilized and then dropped a little bit, that's all because of the lies coming out. Your lies won't do that much longer.
Yeah. Larry, just moments ago, we've learned from the Democrat Senator Blumenthal about he's talking about the boots on the ground in Iran. Here is what is.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. My questions have been unanswered, and I will demand answers because the American people deserve to know. And I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here. And there is also, as disturbingly as anything else, the specter of active Russian aid to Iran, putting in danger American lives. Literally, Russia seems to be aiding our enemy actively and intensively with intelligence and perhaps with other means, and China also may be assisting Iran. So the American people deserve to know much more than this administration has told them about the cost of the war, the danger to our sons and daughters in uniform, and the potential for further escalation and widening of this war, a war of choice made by this president, not chosen by the American people, with potentially huge consequences to American lives.
Yeah.
With regard to Russia and China, I have to say, did you just wake up from a deep sleep? With regard to ground troops, I have to say he's spot on correct, and it will be. And Nima, you know, you check on my grave site, we will be within 5 to 7 years completely and utterly out of the Middle East. Completely gone, because we will have been run out, essentially, just the way we were run out of Afghanistan, and just the way we really were run out of Iraq, with the residual presence caused by ISIS, whom I think we had a real hand in creating. Not necessarily to remain in Iraq, but we had a hand in creating it. And then we took, under Obama, we took advantage of that, and we went back to Iraq. So, but this time it'll be permanent. There will be no return to the Levant, to the Middle East, to Southwest Asia by the United States of America. Verboten, it will not happen. Ground forces will cause us to be defeated in such a resounding way that the American people will live in shock for the next decade. The casualties will be enormous. The cost will be astronomical. And at the end of the day, it will make Afghanistan and the ignominious withdrawal therefrom look like child's play. He's right. He's right to be concerned. I'd be concerned too. I mean, Democrat to hell. If he said the truth, and I suspect he did, he is right.
But he and Lindsey Graham were somehow, great friends when it came to Ukraine. Right now, there is some sort of division between him and Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is advocating, is just begging to send American troops underground to defend Israel. Has he ever been, Larry? Has he ever been on the battlefield?
No, I don't think so. I'll venture a guess, Nima. I don't think you could find probably enough people to build a poker hand who like Lindsey Graham in the Senate of the United States of America. I just don't think you could. First of all, they probably know he's deeply embedded in the Epstein files. That's the word on the street anyway. The street of South Carolina. And his being embedded in the Epstein files is not necessarily conducive to his political career, I'll guarantee you. So he's one of those who doesn't want it to come out fully.
There is we
can't forget that component of this war, Epstein. It's a very good distractor.
Yeah. It's so deep, I think, the connection between the war and Epstein. Larry, there was an interview on CNN with one of the officials in Iran, Kamal Kharazi. He was the advisor of Supreme Leader of Iran, who was assassinated. And I would assume that he's going to be the advisor, one of the main advisors to the new leader of Iran. And here is what he said on CNN.
Is reporting in Tehran. He has an exclusive interview now with Kamal Kharazi, who is the foreign policy advisor to the Supreme Leader. CNN is operating in Iran with the permission of the Iranian government, but maintains full editorial control over what it reports. Have a look at this.
Iran has a new supreme leader. What does that mean for your military effort and the confrontation with the United States and in Israel?
That means the system is quite functioning.
So the United States says it's drastically degraded the Iranian military, the capabilities as far as missiles is concerned, drones is concerned. How much longer can you do this?
That is one of the false narratives that the United States government is producing. Iranian military is quite strong, as you see, because they have the motivation, they have the arms that they need, which are produced in Iran. As a matter of fact, we are not dependent on any other country for weapons and arms.
So your side is ready for a long war if the United States and Israel choose that. Do you consider this an existential threat to the Islamic Republic?
It is an existential threat to the Islamic Republic, and therefore we have to stay with full might, as we are doing now.
Is your side seeking, or will you seek, a ceasefire with the United States at this point in time, and with Israel?
I don't see any room for diplomacy anymore, because Donald Trump had been deceiving others and not keeping with his promises. And we experienced this in 2 times of negotiations, that while we were engaged in negotiation, they struck us.
How does all of this end then? If you say right now there's no room for negotiation, President Trump says he wants complete surrender, what does that lead to?
There's no room unless the economic pressure would be built up to the extent that other countries would intervene to guarantee this termination of aggression of Americans and Israelis against Iran.
Yeah.
But what he didn't say, Nima, and what is increasingly apparent, I think, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump's intellect in this regard, nor Pete Hegseth, nor Marco Rubio. I'm talking about the Rothschilds and the JP Morgans and others who are behind this administration in various guises, hiding behind the curtains, most of them. You've not heard a lot of their names. What's happening is what happened in 1953. It's inchoate. It's not very apparent. It's not involving a Kermit Roosevelt or the CIA, Mossad, MI6. It's a grab for oil, just as Venezuela was a grab for oil. And it's necessarily a grab for oil because we want the oil. That's part of it. It always is. But it's a grab for oil as a deterrent to the power in the world that is triumphant at this moment, China. And its ally of convenience, perhaps, but nonetheless ally, Russia. This is all about, in geopolitical, geostrategic terms, fighting China in a forward way. We've chosen Iran as the battleground. I've not talked about this much because people don't understand when you talk about this sort of thing. They don't understand that the great game is afoot again, and it has some of the same players it had before. The newest one is the American empire, and we've been playing it since 53 when we derailed Iran's genuine attempt to, one, establish a working democracy, and two, take over the resources that belong to it from a profligate, perfidious, deadly colonial power known as Britain, and have those resources produced for the Iranian people rather than for the British Empire. And we just took over. In 53, Churchill talked us into it. We did it. They helped, and we took over. So we're the bastard now. And that's what this is really all about. I'm not even sure, Nima, that Donald Trump understands that. I know Pete Hegseth doesn't. I know Marco Rubio doesn't. I know Lindsey Graham doesn't. There may be one or two people in the American system that understand that aren't a part of this coterie of billionaires and oligarchs who come from all over the world and who are really running this game, really playing this poker, really playing this game. That's what's really happening. And that's why I come back to what that man just said. We're losing. We are going to lose. And when we lose, we'll be gone. And he knows that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
It's getting hard to talk, you know.
Yeah.
I'm so disgusted with my country. I don't know where to go with it anymore. We're walking into a blind alley with idiots leading us and idiots holding our hands and idiots all around us. And I didn't even talk about the attempt Hegseth is still making to create Christian nationalists in the military so they can take their oath to Jesus and become soldiers for God. We're getting all kinds of things like that at the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. They, NCOs and others sending us notes telling us what's happening. They're being briefed in command rooms that they're on a mission for God. They're going for Armageddon. They should feel safe because God is on their side. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for the opportunity.
See you soon.
Take care. See you Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.